Good day to you. This is going to be the last, I think the second to last of the videos I'm doing regarding the youth gathering. The one I'm going to do, I've actually recorded it already, but I'm going to release later, is a video about kind of a Lutheran approach to film. And I say it's tied to the youth gathering, kind of, because it was basically the presentation I would have done had I been one of the breakaways or the sessions or whatever. Just because it's running through my brain, I wanted to put it out there. But anyways, I wanted to talk. What I wanted to do with this video, and I thought this was a good way to end, because I did want to talk about the final days of the gathering, and in particular worship service and things like that. And the way I want to talk about this is I want to actually address some of the concerns that have come out from social media. I've been a pastor of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod for 12 years. And this is now my fourth LCMS youth gathering since I've been a pastor. And one of the things I know is pretty much inevitable when there is a youth gathering is that people are there's going to be discussions and debates within our church body. Usually, quite often, it's revolve around worship. And so I wanted to address some of the things that came out in the last week and a half or 2 weeks or whatever it has already been. And so let me first deal with music choices. I'm going to talk about this topic, and I think it's a good topic to have. So, as part of the way the youth gathering was conducted, is the youth gathering had, so this is the structure of the day. So you met on day one was pretty much just the mass event. The mass event happened at the Superdome, and it involved there's what they called the house band, and they lead in praise music, so modern contemporary style worship, and they played a number of songs, and there's usually a message. The first night, so if I kind of think of from a review or reactionary standpoint, I do think the first night was the weakest of the nights. There is just kind of disjointed. And it's not even a comment on the speaker, but I honestly think it didn't fit the flow, the vibe that was going. And I say this because right before she spoke, they played this great little video package of about the Hurricane Katrina in 2005. And this is kind of where I'm wondering if maybe I don't know if the gathering is overly scripted or overly planned or not. But honestly, one of the things I was kind of surprised is they didn't talk about the recent stuff, because there was some very recent relevant stuff they could have hit on. They could have talked about the floods in Texas. The floods are all across this country. They could have talked about the fires that happened in California. Could have talked about some of the tornadoes. All these things the ongoing wars. I mean, there's a lot of these themes that they could have focused in on that night. And I really thought they were going to do that, and they really didn't. I thought the tone was a little bit disjointed. But anyways, that was what the first night was, focusing on these things. And then, and every night ended with these mass events. The day was, people would spend a lot of the time at the convention center. So they'd go to the floor where there's, booths from our Concordias, from many of the RSOs, so recognized service organizations of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. And there's also opportunities for serving, like there's mercy meals. I think there's some people that are building like these houses or whatever. People could have their hair cut. You can tell I didn't really go for that and donate my hair. I don't think it's going to go very far. And of course, there's places for food, and upstairs was the sections, and people engaged in various topics, and there's a lot of them. And those were very beneficial. And the comment I heard from so many people is they wish they had done more. But back to the thing of the mass events. The big debate that's going on in our church body. And by the way, I think every other night was really good. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, the themes were very spot on, tightly woven, and worked really, really, really well together. It's just that first night, it was just felt really disjointed on the way it flowed. And that's not a comment on, there isn't any individual that did poorly. I just didn't feel the flow of it. And, but like I said, the rest was good. It was, and not that anything was bad or false being said, just disjointed. But the big conversation that's going online is about the music. And in particular, the use of music from people such as Stephen Furtick and Elevation Worship. And people also bring up Bethel Worship and all that type of stuff. And I'm going to straight up tell you that I am sympathetic to this. One of the songs that was sung a couple of times was this one. It's just simply titled Praise. Is Elevation Worship, Brandon Lake, Chris Brown. So it just simply goes like this. So this is the way it just goes. It says, as long as I'm breathing, I've got a reason to praise the Lord, oh my soul. Praise the Lord, oh my soul. It is insanely catchy. I mean, it really, really is. And I've heard a comment that says, like, well, the fact that all the people know it says it must be being sung in church, and people barely saying this version of A Mighty Fortress, which incorporated the Swedish version, that means there's something wrong in the churches. And no, it's just simply that praise is on the radios and Mighty Fortress is not on the radios. That's basically it. And even beyond that, I don't listen to Christian radio stations. We don't sing this song in our church, but I could sing to it very easily because it is so ridiculously catchy. But that being said, theologically, it has issues. So you have like this line right here, cause praise is the waters my enemies drown in. And so it's talking about my praise. It's like all through. It's like I'll praise. So praise is something that I am doing, and the thing that I am doing is the waters my enemies drown in. So it's kind of like you don't need to look to Jesus to endure. You got to look to yourself and your praise. And if you just praise right, you just praise enough, then your enemies and your things that you're trying to endure will be crushed. Who needs to look to Jesus when you just can look to your praise, right? It's kind of what's going on here. And this is actually and then here it keeps going. I'll praise when I feel it. I'll praise when I don't. I'll call it praise because I know you're still in control. Then here it goes. Because my praise is a weapon. It's more than a sound. Oh, my praise is the shout that brings Jericho down. So just as a note, Stephen Furtick, who's one of the people, he's the pastor at Elevation Church, is a notorious, what he uses, narcissist. That means that narcissist is somebody who reads themselves into the scriptures. And they make the Bible all about themselves. And you definitely see this going on here with, oh, my praise is the shout that brings Jericho down. And the thing is the power, the authority, the strength is being placed on me. That I'm doing it, all right? And so this is the problem. And so theologically it's a problem. But even beyond that, Stephen Furtick has very problematic theology. It's debatable whether or not he's a Christian. There's a lot of uncertainty as to whether or not he believes in the triune God, especially due to his very tight-knit relationship with T.D. Jakes, who does reject the Trinity. And so this was a big question. And like I said, I'm sympathetic to this. When we sing this song at the LCMS Youth Gathering, or any song that is written by Elevation Worship, and we're going to be using CCLI, which is the standard license for contemporary worship. Whenever you do that, the money you send the money there is money being sent on your behalf to Elevation Worship. So in other words, we are in effect supporting a ministry like Elevation Worship, which has very problematic and questionable very problematic theologies. And the question is, do we want to be actively supporting this? And again, I'm sympathetic to that concern. And I don't know. There's definitely theological arguments against this song, but I definitely think there's some that's in there. But as far as that question about where the funds go to, is there legitimacy to this? There might be, and I don't. My answer, and I gave this in my previous, in one of my previous videos, is my answer to this is maybe instead of just why don't we need to work on music. We need to work on developing catchy, good music that has good theology and it does not support the likes of Elevation Worship. We have 3 years to work on it. So, and I really, really hope that our synod will support more of what's going on down at Concordia Irvine and maybe getting some of the other Concordias involved in this movement to create theologically strong Lutheran worship. So, all right. So that's the first. That's the first controversy. Controversy number 2. Okay, that's not a controversy. Controversy number 2 that I came across was Shelley's. It's not what Shelley said. It's the fact that Shelley spoke, and I've heard people argue this and understand that she gave. I thought she did great. Her message was great. The same holds true of why do I keep forgetting her name, but the surfer who spoke on the last night we were there, and both of them had great messages. They did really good. The issue is it's a women's ordination debate, and they said, well, but and they say, well, women should not be pastors, should not be preaching during the divine service. And the simple answer is, it wasn't the divine service. And I honestly would say that the youth gathering did a very, very good job of distinguishing the two. They did a very good job of distinguishing between the youth gathering, between the divine service, and what's going on the rest of the week. They did it in a few ways. One is that when you were there for the mass events, there was lights going, there's kind of flashing. The stadium itself was darkened. Pastor Finneran, so he's the district president of Minnesota North. He came out in more casual clothing. And there's a lot more, clapping, flashing of lights, rolling the arm, boo. I can't do any of that. I can't keep any rhythm like that. But there's all these little cues to let you know those distinct. Because when you got to the divine service, the lights were, all the lights in the Superdome were on. It was bright in the stadium. There was no flashy lights. You saw a band out. You saw the altar. You saw it adorned in the paraments. You saw pastors wearing robes and clerical collars, including Pastor Finneran. And then the other thing they did is they made sure to use, for the most part, divine service setting 2. And I thought that was wonderful or divine service setting 1, from Lutheran Service Book. And what it did is just hearing the music, that organ and some of those hymns, it cued to the kids. And the kids dressed differently. You notice a lot of the kids were dressing nicer. There's definitely a mentality that this is not the same as what we've been doing the rest of the week. So show reverence. Show respect during this course of worship. Now there was a hiccup, I think, in the process, and I don't think this is. And it's not that people. I think people just got just really, really distracted. The main hiccup I would say in the worship was that when during communion distribution, most of the music was sung by the choir and the orchestra, and very little music was sung by the people. And so when you have 20,000 high schoolers idle doing nothing, they're going to forget there's even a worship service going on. And I definitely think that was a failure. That was kind of a mistake on their part. I'm not trying to say that to be harsh, but that was just a mistake. And I'm hoping they improve, that they go differently next time and have them singing, have them busy. Because if you don't have them busy, they're going to figure it's what's going on. All the reverence that you've done a good job of setting up to that point is going out the window. But otherwise, they did a very, very good job of distinguishing everything else that's going on the week before. So there was no doubt, there was no sense that when she was up there, that she was taking the role of a pastor, the role of preaching. They did a very, very good job of distinguishing that. So I don't see this as an issue. There's definitely, I mean, even amongst you guys are making an issue of it. I guarantee it, a lot of you guys many of you guys would go to Making the Case conference with, that is, done by Issues, etc. And we've seen Molly Hemingway. We've seen Riley Gates, who's not even a Lutheran. I don't think she is. Doing speaking events. So there's definitely a precedent. But it was a non-worship setting. And you knew it wasn't. And don't treat our youth, don't treat our teenagers like they're stupid. They're not stupid. All right? They understood. They got it. I watched. Most of these kids understood this was different than what we've done the rest of the week. Right? So I see this as a non-issue. The one last thing I heard that was a controversy, and I don't think it was, most of the synod didn't treat it as a controversy, but a few people did. I'm not going to get into the debate about worship style because that's an endless debate that's been going on for who knows how many decades. But one of the things that I honestly was surprised to see it was a bit of a debate was the whole thing with Westboro Baptist Church. On Tuesday morning of last week, so a week ago, the Westboro Baptist Church, which when I heard about this, I was like, holy smokes, these guys still exist? They stood outside the convention center and protested. They protested the youth gathering, basically, letting all the kids know that they're God's enemy, that God hates them and stuff like that. Which, again, a good reminder to y'all that theology does matter. So people say, oh, doesn't, yeah, at least they're going to church thing. Yeah, it doesn't work. Theology does matter. You're seeing a really, really rotten example of bad, really, really good example of very bad theology, but theology does matter, right? In Westboro Baptist Church, just they're more Calvinist in orientation. And so they hold to the idea that God chooses some for salvation, some for hell. And as far as in their mindset is that we are all chosen for hell. We're all going to hell. And I don't know why they're protesting us. And what's the point of it if they think we're going to hell anyways? But anyways, aside from that. So they're outside and they're protesting, and some people within our church bodies say, hey, we're giving these protesters what they want. We're giving them attention. And I'm going to tell you that no, they didn't. They didn't get attention. And this is because the gathering committee did amazing. They handled that situation so amazingly. What they did is so we came out of our hotel. Our hotel is really close to the convention center. And so we got to the light, and they basically had this line of young adult volunteers, flex volunteers, etc. And even had a few police officers there. And they're lying like, woo, welcome to day 4, whatever, woo, 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 yeah, Jesus. Like, they're cheering and they're loud. And the line was thick enough, you couldn't unless you're really looking for it, you couldn't quite see those protesters. And you could not hear them. They basically did a magnificent job of wasting the time of the Westboro Baptist Church protesters. So any idea that they empowered them, no, it doesn't hold. And I give credit to our synodical president, Matthew Harrison. He went out and he talked to them and he brought it up in the sermon on Wednesday morning, and he delivered. And I loved what he said that they told him, like, "Did you know there's sinners amongst you?" And he's like, "Well, duh." I love that. Great line, great moment, and it was a great sermon altogether. So this is my response to these controversies, and I really haven't seen the only one that I felt the weight of that question about the music, not just about the theology of the music, but who we are supporting. And it's a good question. It's a good discussion to have. We have 3 years. Let's discuss it, but probably the better thing to do is work on getting better music. Because you could do the whole, why don't we just sing all hymns? It's not going to happen. All right? It's not going to happen at the National Youth Gathering. So instead, let's work on getting better music. That's a much better solution. Get music that doesn't have these bigger issues. All right? One final thing, and I wanted to bring up on this youth gathering, because the youth gathering I thought was done very, very excellent. There's so many good things it did, so many things it did well. One thing, before the National Youth Gathering happened, so I'm in this Facebook group. It's called, the group is called the Facebook Winkle. It's just for Lutheran pastors. So if you're not a Lutheran pastor, you've tried it, and if you're a synodical or district official, you will not be welcome into it because it's for pastors to discuss things that are going on. But I brought up a question, and this was my question. I don't think I'm really exposing anything because it was my question. I'm exposing what I myself asked. I was actually honestly asking a stewardship question. Is the youth gathering worth it? That was my question from a financial standpoint. I mean, I was looking at the youth account for our church after going to the gathering, and we went through a lot of money. We really, really did, and we went through quite a bit of money through the week. And I'm like, what do we have? I hope that we could go to Higher Things next summer in St. Louis. And I encourage all of you to go support the Higher Things Youth Conference. I think it's wonderful. Now, if you go there, don't expect the LCMS Youth Gathering. Just as I told my kids, don't go to Higher Things expecting the LCMS Youth Gathering. Don't go to the LCMS Youth Gathering expecting higher things. They have very distinctive aims, different styles, etc., etc. But I think they both have very, very much of a place in our synod. But financially, it's tough to do it because of the expense of the youth gathering. And I don't want our ministry to become a ministry that's completely focused on something that happens every 3 years. You're going to slowly cannibalize your ministry at the expense of a single event. And I really went into this question for myself. It's like, is it worth it? And I also take issue with the dates. It's been kind of the trend that the youth gathering starts on either a Friday or a Saturday, and it goes over the weekend, and it goes until the middle of the week. The problem with this is a large percentage of pastors are not able to attend. The reason this is because there's only so many pulpit supply to go around. And we also don't want to burn through the substitute pastor expense. And so, sorry about that. And so I struggled with that. Those are two things I was kind of struggling with. And there's a reason why I go to the youth gathering, by the way. I believe it's important for pastors to do that because, one, it is a wonderful opportunity to build relationships with your kids and their parents. Because you spend all that, especially if you're driving like we did, I spent a lot of time in the car with everyone. And does it get to feel long? Yeah, but you still treasure it. Secondly, I hear people sometimes say, oh, I love the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. Oh, I love the Lutheran Church. I'm going to tell you something. I don't love the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. I don't love the Lutheran Church. I love the people in the Missouri Synod, and I love our church body. I don't love our church body. I love the doctrine that our church body teaches, and more specifically, my love is for Christ, whom that doctrine is who that doctrine is all about. Jesus is the heart of that, and if the LCMS starts teaching the Lutheran Church of Missouri Synod starts teaching something that's contrary to Christ, contrary to the gospel, I'm not going to stay around just because I love the Missouri Synod, right? Our job is to remain faithful to Christ, not the Lutheran Church of Missouri Synod. So I bring that up because I am not so naive to believe that the Missouri Synod will always have faithful teaching. And so that's why one of the reasons I go to these gatherings is I want to know what is being taught. I want to hear it. I want to know it. And if there's something I have to correct and fix, I want to be able to be there to have heard it and be able to talk to my kids and say, hey, so I'll be like, this was good, but this thing I'm a little concerned about. And this has come up with district youth gatherings in particular. And so so I like that they fixed that date. In a few years, they're going to actually have the youth gathering in San Antonio, and it will be July 3rd through the 7th. And I love that they made that move. And that does fix one of my questions. And going back to the question, is it worth it? Because, by the way, July 3rd to 7th, going back to that, it's Monday through Friday, which means even if it might mean that a pastor may have to fly to get to San Antonio and fly back if they want to be at both Sunday services at their congregation. But it's a lot more plausible for a pastor to make it to the gathering without every pastor having to find a fill-in. And I think that's a big. I give big old thumbs up to the gathering committee for doing that. Thank you. But back to the question, is it worth it? Is this financially worth it? And I say, yes, I believe it's still worth it. Because I saw the impact it had on all of our kids, on our volunteers. But that does not mean that we shouldn't be looking for ways to help with the financial aspect of it, because it should not be the entirety of a youth ministry. Because you spend 3 years focusing on one event, and then what happens if you have kids that it just happens to line that the gatherings keep landing wrong and they can't go. That means you're spending 3 years focusing on a single event that some of your kids will never ever get to attend, and you're sacrificing the ministry to them for the ministry of the others, and that's not good. So, we got to figure out the cost end of this, and I don't know the answer totally. Higher Things is definitely cheaper, but I don't know if the Higher Things model works for the youth gathering, especially if you want to do that 20,000 thing. Is it a matter of trying to figure out how to get honest, and part of it I wonder is there any way they could get the hotel price down? That would probably help, because they're really not they're kind of costly. I mean, I compared what we paid for our hotels to what I could have gotten if I bought those rented those hotels through Priceline or my IHG or whatever, and they're like $100 a night cheaper. This is the same problems I've been having with some of these conventions. I would hope that they can negotiate these hotel prices down, because these cities have got to realize that if we weren't going, you're talking about San Antonio, you're talking about New Orleans. Nobody's going to New Orleans or San Antonio in July because they're stinking hot, So there's got to be a way to negotiate those prices down even more. This is the same thing. This is a problem that's been happening with comic book conventions. San Diego used to be the San Diego Comic Con. Their hotels were very low on price, but they're getting They're getting out of control. Is there a point where somebody needs to step in and say, hey guys, you got to get this down? I mean, that would be a step to help the financial aspect. And I don't know what else there is. But hopefully that's something we keep exploring and thinking, what's the best way from a stewardship standpoint? What do we do with this to not jeopardize, not harm ministry throughout the years? And I don't believe that, I go to the youth ministries in our area. A lot of them, a good number of them, do some type of a trip as a group every single year. And many of our Missouri City churches can't do that because we spend so much money on the national gathering. And again, what do we do to offset that problem? So there you go. I know I'm over 30 minutes, and I know these videos have been pretty long. Hopefully they've been helpful to you and given you thoughts or whatever. And I realize this one is kind of being spoken to people of the gathering and people who are not at the gathering. And I'm just giving honest thoughts to some of my concerns. But I think, and also responding to the concerns of others that I think some have validity, some I just don't agree with. And like I said, I'm not going to engage in the overall worship debates because it's not going to go anywhere. So, blessings, and the Lord carry you and lead you wherever He has for you. In Jesus' name, amen.